ask Sharon a question or you have an additional thought or insight, please drop it in the Q&A tab to be addressed in our upcoming panel discussion. I'd like to thank Dairy New South Wales again for enabling this session, and I'd now like to invite April Brown, Lead for Learning and Development Partners at Dairy Australia, to join our three speakers by turning their video and audio back on for a panel discussion on Farm Teams, A World of Perspectives. We're a little bit tight on time, but we'll certainly address as many questions as we can. So thanks, everyone. So we have a number of questions in the Q&A box. I'll first go to Paul, who has a question for Elise. It's the dairy industry is dominated by family-owned businesses employing a few additional staff to do various manual jobs. What aspects of what you've talked about do you think best translate to this industry?
I think flexible working and families goes hand in hand. We've been doing a lot of work with Diversity Council of Australia, with the Diversity Inclusion Board for some of the sectors, and also with families in Australia, working families. And flexibility is really critical to families. The idea that your dairy farm will fit into the flow of those families' lives is incredibly important to those individuals. And I think Sharon's presentation really spoke to this, talking about her employees as a total family unit and knowing the names of the children that are in that family and the development stages of those children. And I can only imagine having that level of intimacy as a small farm, you would be able to look at what are the best flexible work practices so you can get as much out of that relationship as possible from both sides, so that those family members can take off time when it's important to them. And I loved this in Nollaig, Snakes and Ladders. You know, one of the snakes at the very top of the list that was there was reneging on time off as a mistake that will take you all the way back down to the bottom. So how do you have a joint commitment around a calendar that provides flexibility so that you can ebb and flow into the life and family life of the people that you employ from a small farming perspective? I think you're at an advantage in comparison to bigger organisations where they're trying to do it on a macro scale. So a really simple lever you can pull that is incredibly meaningful to those individuals as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Elise, and thanks, Paul, for the question. The next question is to Nollaig, or anyone else actually that would like to make comment as well. It's from Jane. Thinking about our born on farm employees that have learned from previous generations and possibly learned what is not acceptable today. How do we manage that? Is it a matter of a reintroduction to the business, especially when they've been tolerated because they are family? They're capable and valuable to the business, but can be a pain. Nollaig.
Thank you, Jane. Great question. I would always say today is the first day of the rest of your life. So it is really, if you want this to work well going forward, start today. You know, you really can. The risk is not doing anything. And that person shouldn't be tolerated for themselves as well. Maybe the person is a pain because you don't listen to their opinion. And actually having that conversation, and we heard Sharon discuss the importance of having conversations in her business has made a huge difference to her quality of enjoying farming, but also getting feedback, etc. So I'm a psychologist. I'm really fascinated by this idea of tolerating them even though they're a pain, because I think there's tension there that could definitely be worked out through a conversation. But never be afraid. You should never do anything that damages your business objectives. So what is it your business is trying to achieve, and how does that person compromise those? And sitting down and just saying, this is not acceptable behavior. The best way to do that is to challenge the behavior, not the person. So you don't turn up, it's not the typical conversation of, oh, you've been a pain again, we're sick of listening to you, your mother was a pain, your great-granddad was a pain. Saying, these are the standards in our business. This is not acceptable what you have done, it can't happen again. And people will take that because that's strict but fair. And we like strict but fair. We don't like being bullied. We don't like being humiliated. We don't like being told off. But we'll hang our heads and it's, accept mea culpa. If we're in Ireland, we'd say if you were acting the maggot and you know you were, you usually take it on the chin. Strict but fair, get your standards out and compare that person's behaviour and show them what's acceptable or unacceptable. But start today. Don't tolerate somebody that makes your life more difficult.
today. Great insights, Nollaig, and hopefully you can process those a bit, Jane. Speaking of Nollaig, actually, anyone else got any other responses to that question from across the panel?
Oh, look, I think that's a really great question and a great answer, Nollaig. The only thing I would add on there as well is I think it's really important with, how we treat our family as employees of the business in terms of, I guess, exemplifying good behaviour and good relationships for those in our business that aren't our family. And most family farms do have that casual milker that comes in, or people from outside the business, and treating people in different ways. It's incredibly confusing for both the family member employee and the external to actually understand and navigate, well, what is this workplace and work environment? Where do I fit? And I think we've got to be really careful that we are quite, I guess, equal in the way that we treat everybody, despite whether we're sitting around the dinner table with them at night or we're saying goodbye at 5 o'clock. So that'd be my addition there, Greg.
Yeah, thanks a bunch, April. That's a really good insight. So now we've got a couple of questions from Kenny. So these are heading your direction, Nollaig, but please, anyone else that would like to comment on them, pop in as well. So the first one, Nollaig, how important is ongoing training for dairy staff that's sponsored by their employees?
Training should be relevant, firstly. It should be relevant and have a return for your business, because you're going to resent the person if you're training them to do something that's not relevant to your business. It's a tricky one. It depends on the scale of your business. It depends on the development of the person so it's situational. It's understanding who's in your business and what training would be useful to them. Don't forget that training could be as simple as having a really good conversation with your staff about the best way to do something, about best practice. Training doesn't have to look like this really formal, institutionalized concept. Training is the imparting of information to help somebody do something better. That could be taking them to a discussion group because you happen to be discussing genomics or something, and you're learning and you're helping them to learn that way. So there's a difference between formal training and just acquiring information. Understand what your business needs. Not everybody wants to go on that training journey. They want to stay on farm. They don't necessarily want to be in what they would perceive as a formal opportunity. Ask. There is no substitution in the workplace for communication. And I heard Sharon say it, what do you want from your training? What do you think is acceptable? And when they come to you with a reasonable option, being able to say, I will do my best to facilitate that for you. And if I can't do it this year, I'll put it as a priority for next year. Have the conversation.
Yep, perfect insight. Thanks heaps, Nollaig. Speaking of which, Kenny's next point is about the idea that many dairy farmers realistically only want employees to do the most basic menial tasks on the farm. How can this be reversed to attract employees that are career orientated for the dairy industry?
I love this comment, because the first thing what's a menial task? Well, people are going to say milking. And as dairy farmers, milking is the most critical task on your business. So, what we title as menial jobs are actually hugely important and should be respected as that. And understanding that it's that pyramid that I showed, in terms of everything, you need all those building blocks to make a really good business. Respect is respect. The person is first and foremost a person before they ever do a job for you. So understanding that no matter what the job is, it's the famous one, isn't it, in NASA, where I can't remember which president it was, maybe President Kennedy, standing and speaking to the janitor in NASA, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, how do you contribute to this business?" And he said, "I'm putting a man on the moon." And this was the man holding the sweeping brush, cleaning up the place. So we all contribute to the bigger system. When we see tasks as menial, we are probably dismissive of the job and therefore dismissive of the person doing it. That's really dangerous. My experience now is that really solid milker who will reliably turn up every day, they have become gold dust and very rare. And so that job that maybe people dismissed as, he's just a milker, or they're just a milker, or, almost dismissive because that's such a routine job and it's such a fixed idea with very little variation in it, that's a menial job. So we need all those jobs and we need to respect those titles. And also menial jobs, it doesn't have to be one person who does it all. Having that flexibility, I loved Elise's comments about flexibility, bringing in a number of people so all of those jobs get done, really powerful. Let's move away from this fixed notion that I have to have an employee in agriculture every day of the week for the rest of their lives. The entire world has moved away from that type of model. We need a tolerance for high turnover with an ambition for longevity. Sharon gave just extraordinary example of how you can keep a great person for a long time by getting the basics right. And one of them is respecting that person and the task you're asking them to do.
Look, perfect insight, Nollaig. And I might actually throw to Sharon, because I think, Sharon, what you did about sharing yourself and Darren's vision for the future with potential employees might sort of help create this buy-in and maybe reverse this challenge as well that Kenny talks about. What do you think, Sharon?
I would have said, and for a few of these questions, it's been, it's not only the vision for our farm, but it's our values. And if you're sharing those values with them, you're respecting them, what they're doing. And I know we're only a smaller farm, but there's no jobs on our farm that we ask our staff to do that we don't do ourselves, and they don't ever see us doing at times as well. Because there's not really any menial tasks. Yes, there's ones that you have to do over and over again, cleaning the calf sheds. But without those jobs done properly, you're not going to have the quality you want from your cows. Your cow's health won't be as good. You're not going to be looking after your environment, which are all really, really important. So it goes back to your vision and your values. And that's where the plan on the page was fantastic, having that at our interview, because we did go through all those things. We had it there to prompt us. We didn't miss things out because it was all there in black and white. Yeah, and it all goes back to your values. If you're treating those people with your core values of ours are honesty, integrity, then, you know, they will respond in kind.
Fantastic, Sharon. So we've got another one here from Kenny that I might actually ask each of you for a comment on. We've got another 4 or 5 minutes. So Kenny goes to say, dairy farms are mostly family owned and operated. This can explain why, in my experience, most dairy business owners don't adequately reward themselves for the work that's done. Could this be one of the reasons why it's difficult to attract quality employees into the sector, because they are not properly rewarded for their work done? So maybe April, start with a thought or a comment from you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question and observation, and certainly I guess what we call imputed labour, yourself as a farmer as well. I'm very conscious of that, and it is very easy to fall into the trap as a family farm. You always go above and beyond, and you know, our farms up in New South Wales have just been through the drought and the floods and the fires, and they're the times in adversity where particularly you do call on family members for the above and beyond, and have higher expectations and that are not necessarily remunerated for. And I think we've got to be very careful that we don't revert back to that same behaviour with our employees. It's not okay for family, and I don't think it's okay to sort of have that attitude for your employees as well. And whilst we do have highs and lows, it's really important to recognise what's right, and whether that be financial remuneration or other ways that we can remunerate staff and sort of treat everybody equally, because we are exposed to times when we really do have to put the pressure on people. So taking those good behaviours despite what life and the world is throwing at us.
Perfect. Thanks, April. Maybe a quick comment from yourself, Elise, just around this being rewarded properly for the work that's done and the importance of that from a survey point of view.
Yeah, I think a lot of the research around recognition and reward isn't just cash either. So I think there's a few things that we saw in Sharon's presentation. She started by connecting people to purpose, being really clear on how when you're milking, you're actually nourishing Australia. And this is the way we do it and the standards that we represent. This idea as well of what we call a good jobs, from one of the MIT professors, Zainab Ton, talks about the good jobs strategy, which is taking what looks like a small and menial task, but providing someone with development opportunities for something bigger. So how can you stretch your employees to learn how to run the farm? You know, how can they dip into new kinds of activities? One of the most successful retailers in the US, Trader Joe's, implements the good job strategy, which means that every single employee can work the cash register, can clean the toilets, can stack the shelves, and can do visual merchandising as if they owned the store. So that kind of recognition of their innate latent capability to say, you've got some special skills. You know, Nollaig spoke to this gentleman who'll swim from Ireland to New Zealand because somebody said, hey, you've got something special and we've got big plans for you. opening up that person's career, opening up the job prospects, seeing them as an asset, as Nollaig mentioned, that you would invest in, that you will support. It doesn't just have to be cash. It can be stretch opportunities. It can be training. It can be development. If you have another family farm, could you send that employee across for a week to learn some of their skills and bring them back? There are so many cost-effective ways of training, developing, and recognizing talent in your teams. So I would, yes, think about, you need to have fair remuneration, absolutely, but think about some of those other aspects of what we call total rewards and complete recognition that you can bring into the picture as well.
Beautiful. Thanks, Elise. Nollaig, in 1 minute, a thought from yourself on this point?
Oh, gosh, Greg, 1 minute, that's cruel. Okay, so can you look, it's a brilliant question. My experience is that we tend to undervalue work that we are very good at. So when we are very good at something, we diminish its value almost. And so we're reluctant to pay the other person something that we find really easy. And that is a problem in farming, because when you're trying to pay somebody for the job, we maybe dismiss it and say, but sure, I could do that in my sleep. What do you ask me to pay that amount of money for it? And that is very, very common. One of the fascinating things that has happened from some of the work I do with in discussion groups is we do a well-known exercise I do called the discounted calendar. And it's really when you can put what a farmer does in the farming year down on paper, it is extraordinary. Okay, majority of companies would have 5 people doing what that person does. They'd have the accountant, they'd have, the vet, they'd have all the skills that are there. And so getting somebody to visualize, you can say, oh, I had a long day, but what does that look like? Oh, I work hard. What does that actually look like? Getting somebody to visualize what that looks like, and then asking them to say, there's an opportunity costing you doing all that work. How much do you value your time off? How much do you value something else? And then they say, well, I value my opportunity to do something else this much. And then you can say, well, maybe that's how much the job you're paying for costs. And it just makes them think differently about how they want to pay people, that they're not just buying the skill set, they're buying the opportunity for that person to do something different. So as an employer, I'm fundamentally buying an employee's time. And that time means that they can fill into my work, my roster, and allow me to do other things, higher value things, personal things, to get quality back from the business that I've invested in. So it's really understanding how you value time will make it much easier to value a job. Would be my answer.
Yeah. Beautiful. Look, just in the interest of time, we'll need to wrap things up. So really, what a fantastic session this morning. We've heard a wealth of research, proven ideology, and trusted experience. So now I'd like to finish the session with you all having a bit of a think about one thing that you'll leave this session with that you can use to make change in your own business or organisation. A sincere thank you to our speakers for their time, insights, passion, and perspectives, all proudly supported by Dairy New South Wales. So thank you, and back to you, Lynn and Yanni.